I don't know if you've noticed, but we've been living in crazy town. Still are, actually. You'll have heard it said from me, if no one else, that the powers that ought not to be, the crackpots that got the COVID bit between their teeth and galloped off with it, that they were patently using Orwell's 1984 and Huxley's Brave New World as users' manuals. The whole world stopped being individual countries populated by self-governing free peoples and morphed instead into some sort of homogenous madhouse, lunatics in charge, apparently competing with one another to see who could go nuttiest. Online publication Slay carried this headline recently from the Dutch part of the lunatic asylum. Dutch government official admits COVID pandemic was military operation. Ministry of Health obeys NATO. A top Dutch government official, it reads, has admitted that COVID was a military operation and revealed that her nation was taking orders from the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation. Dutch Health Minister Fleur Agema has revealed that the military operation was led by NATO and the Netherlands National Coordinator for Security and Counter-Terrorism, NCTV. The NCTV is a Dutch government agency that serves the country's national security. During a speech in the Dutch Parliament, Agema acknowledged that the government responded to the pandemic by complying with NATO obligations. In doing so, she confirmed the pandemic policy was a coup d'etat by the NCTV. Prominent Dutch doctor Els van Veen says she finally understands what happened to her and other critical doctors during the corona crisis. Quote, "It was a military operation. The Ministry of Health obeys NATO and NCTV," Dr. Van Veen said in a post on X. Is it just me, or is this wild? According to this testimony from the Netherlands, countries effectively ceded control of the COVID response to NATO. And more importantly, much more importantly, we were neither consulted nor informed. That Dutch MP Agema got it precisely right when she called what happened a coup d'etat. During the pandemic, NATO set the guidelines for the COVID response and coordinated the Stratcom strategic communications. The guidelines were circulated through the member states' foreign ministers. Many believe this explains why Sweden, which only joined NATO this year, was the only country in Europe to adopt a more lenient policy during the pandemic. Earlier, the leader of Verheid, Wilhelm Engel, had made similar revelations. At his trial in Rotterdam on the 22nd of November 2022, in which he was accused of sedition, Engel gave an extensive speech in which he showed how the government has worked to combat critics of the COVID policy. They are using a military method that amounts to mapping, suppressing and disrupting. Critics from the medical world have meanwhile reacted sharply to Agema's revelation, including medical ethicist Wendy Mittmeyer. "It was a military operation," she said. "This was not allowed to be said for 4 years. That was conspiracy theory." Let's notice that we're talking here about a military takeover in response to a disease that was a threat almost exclusively to the very elderly and those with multiple comorbidities besides. The admission from Agema also supports allegations made by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. about the production of the COVID mRNA vaccines in the United States. According to Kennedy, this was also a military operation with close involvement of the US Department of Defense, DoD, and the military-industrial complex. Kennedy argues that the DoD was in full charge and paid pharmaceutical companies for their brand names so people would think they were getting something from Pfizer or Moderna. The minister openly stated that both COVID and the current pandemic preparedness is a military operation that has nothing to do with healthcare in the traditional sense of the word. NATO obligations. Since when did a mutual defence pact have anything to do with how to treat a virus? It's as if we've been living in some bizarre parallel universe where the common cold is treated like an invading army. I don't know about you, but I'm not happy with the idea of shadow governments. decisions made about my freedom by a military junta. We're living in crazy town, as I said. As well as military juntas, where do you stand on concentration camps? I'm pretty sure I remember being told at school that concentration camps were not cool. On July the 26th, 2020, in the United States of America, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, quietly issued a plan for nationwide quarantine camps. No vague proposal, no theoretical exercise. This was a detailed plan with footnotes detailing the isolation of people deemed high risk in what they termed green zones. I quote, "A group of shelters such as schools, community buildings within a camp sector, maximum 50 high-risk individuals per single green zone, where high-risk individuals are physically isolated together. One entry point is used for exchange of food, supplies, etc. A meeting area is used for residents and visitors to interact while practicing physical distancing of 2 metres. No movement into or outside the green zone." Any of this ringing any bells? People rounded up, isolated, denied their rights in the name of public health. I remember, back at the start of all this, 2020, 2021 maybe, drawing parallels with what happened in German cities in the name of controlling typhus and othering of those deemed unclean. I remember talking about the on-ramp to a 20th century motorway leading to a very dark place and being called anti-Semitic for my troubles. The plan had suicide prevention measures. Knowing in advance that people so treated might kill themselves, as people do in concentration camps, they published the plan anyway. The specific targets for the camps were, quote, older adults and people of any age who have serious underlying medical conditions. In other words, the most vulnerable members of society. This plan, in all its terrifying detail, was on the CDC's public website from July 2020 till March 2023. No public notice, no controversy. It's like Hotel California in Crazy Town. You can check out any time you like, provided you can get around the anti-suicide measures, but you can never, leave. And we're not finished either. Vaccine passports, remember them? Well, still in the US, turns out New York, Boston, Chicago, New Orleans, Washington DC and Seattle were to be locked down to include only the vaccinated in public indoor places. The plan was to enforce this with a vaccine passport system and to make it permanent and nationwide, if not worldwide. Worth remembering, in among all this, that the pandemic plan that had existed for years before COVID, that was agreed all over, insisted on the free movement of the general population, come what may. Absolutely no locking down, no masks, no mandated procedures, none of it. That was the plan until Bill Gates's baby, Event 201, came along in 2019, and soon after, one way and another, everything changed. The madness of the locked down cities collapsed when it emerged the jabs couldn't and didn't stop infection or transmission. But for that revelation, who knows? We might have ended up in a dystopia in which proof of medical history dictated freedom or not of movement. In the meantime, without the passports, the CDD imposed rent moratoriums, 6 feet of distance rule, mandated masks, forced businesses to install plexiglass barriers. It was all about the denial of rights and freedom in the name of public health, with plans for concentration camps to boot. This is totalitarianism by stealth, rising insidious as floodwater, where the prison is not the gulag but isolation in your own home, fearful of being labelled anti-science or a conspiracy theorist. And it's not just about the past and the present, more of it lies ahead in the future. Here's a headline from Reclaim the Net, which has it that UK government to test digital ID on veterans by 2025 amid plans for wider use. I don't like digital IDs, and I'm telling you now that I'll never carry one. The Reclaim the Net article reads, those paying attention do not like digital IDs and those containing a person's entire identity and activity, including financial, even less so. To that, the Labour government's reaction has essentially been, we'll keep saying we're not doing it, while at once looking for ways to enforce it on you anyway. If you think that's offensive, wait for it. The guinea pigs are none other than the country's military veterans. 250,000 veterans have been chosen to receive what the government cheerily labels the veteran card. The card will prove their veteran status and speed up access to services and support programmes. These include health services through the National Health Service, housing through a programme for veterans facing homelessness, employment opportunities, cheaper public transportation and other discounts. Odious former Prime Minister Tony Blair is in the mix, of course he is. The man who held the hand of George W. Bush while they both lied us all into an illegal war in Iraq that claimed more than 1 million lives. Not just unflushable, old Tony, but pushing ahead with digital IDs that he says will solve the immigration problems that are, as any fool can see, a direct consequence of the sort of international disruption he specialised in while Prime Minister. The Blair creature wants immigration controls now, he says, controls that would require all of us to carry digital IDs. I think ID cards are inevitably coming, Labour MP Siobhan McDonagh has said, not just because of immigration, but the need to keep NHS records because of benefit entitlements, all sorts of things. They're coming. We live in Crazy Town, in an asylum in which the lunatics have the keys and want all the control. Here's the thing. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you.